Hey, this is Cap, and you're watching Thorin, the only man besides Richard Lewis who somehow found a way to get both League of Legends and Dota Redditors to hate him.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Talk to Thorin, and for this episode, actually, I can't even do the intro properly, because in theory, I thought I was interviewing Geometric, right?
No,
but then I saw online on your Twitter bio, you now say you only want to be known as Geo, right? Is that because there is a person in Rainbow Six who was just called Geometric, who was infinitely more famous than you?
No, it's not.
No? Okay.
No, it's not. The sole reason that my Twitter name is Geometric is because unless Twitter give you a 3-letter name, you can't have one yourself.
Sure. I imagine someone must have that
Geo,
one. Yeah.
No, they don't. No one has it.
Oh, really?
No, absolutely not. But if I could have just @Geo, I would do it, but I can't. So I don't like it when people add like loads of random crap into their name. So I was just like, right, I'll pick like just a word. I've had people offer money for my Twitter @name before. I was like, I'll just pick a word. And then loads of people are like, oh yeah, Geometric. And I'm like, not once have I ever called myself that. Don't do it.
Okay. Right, well, the thing is, oh, by the way, that actually in itself ties into the theme of the interview, because that'll actually be a marker that you've actually made it in esports then, is when you can get the Twitter people who are like the secret Illuminati of Twitter to reply to you.
Right.
I got to that stage myself, you know, it takes a while though. And then when they actually agree to give you the real name, like Jack from Cloud9 just has @Jack or whatever the fuck, you know, something ridiculous like that. Maybe his Jack at the end, like obviously Stewie from Cloud9 has just Stewie. Like, oh, when you get to that level, that is sort of the marker that like, you've been accepted somehow. So anyway, that does tie in. One of the reasons why I'm going to do this interview is because it's actually, usually I just do interviews with people I know from the games that I'm interested in. Like I'm very self-centered in that sense. I just do what I'm interested in. I ask people the questions I want to ask the question of. But I actually wanted to do an interview with you because I don't think I've actually ever seen anyone who in the first years that I've seen them like build a profile online who's doing as many different games, as many different roles as you are actually. Normally people just specialize in one thing, mainly because it's whatever they were good at. And it often takes them years to think of branching on another game. Some people actually, I could tell you right now, some really big casters and analysts in some very big esports games are scared to switch games. Even if their game starts to die, they don't actually have the guts to, like, I try to get them a comment in CS, try to tell them, you know, you could pick up League of Legends, mate. You could do all that. They're too afraid to. So that's where I wanted to start actually, right? Why so many different games? Why so many different roles? Like, why have you never just picked one and stuck with it?
So it's interesting you say that, because in the long term, and what I've always wanted has just to be mainstay in one game. It just so happened that, so I've been doing this for like a year and a couple of months, and it just so happened that circumstance didn't necessarily allow that. I went in to Overwatch, and I really dug my heels in and was very stubborn about the fact that that was the game that I was going to do. But I went into esports straight away doing it full time, and so I had to make money. And so you know, I got on an agency within like a month of being offered my first job, and they were like, all right, here's some like random gigs and stuff like that you can do. And I was like, well, okay, like I've got to pay rent. I live in central London. I don't have the luxury of being able to turn down a lot of stuff like that. And I have been selective over time, but I was trying to pick things that, you know, would help me grow and things like that, while also trying to specifically brand myself as just in Overwatch. And eventually I decided, no, I was done with Overwatch. And after that, it was kind of an interesting time because I had to figure out where I wanted to go. I was really interested in Call of Duty and Rainbow Six because I've always been very stringently into first-person shooters. Call of Duty was a weird one because like I've never really been like console esports is not necessarily my thing, but I really like the community. But Call of Duty was also kind of strange because the way that their talent is done at the moment wasn't super conducive to being able to break into the game.
Sure.
Rainbow Six I was super interested in for ages, actually, since like March 2018, and I put it off for a really long time. And at the beginning of this year I was like, okay, no, that's where like my attention's going to be now. I'd kind of been on the periphery of the community for a while. I've been friends with the talent, some of the players, and a number of people have tried to encourage me to like commit to Rainbow Six, and I was like, okay, I'm finally going to do that, and this is where I want to be. It's not that I ever wanted to be someone who specializes in a load of games. Like, actually quite the opposite. It just so happened that I got offered various bits of work in various different games. And overall, actually, I think it's been a really good point of growth and a really big point of learning, because it means that I've been able to take standards from various games and be able to assess how I approach my work and how my colleagues approach their work from the basis of quite an educated point of view, I think, especially considering I've only been in it for just over a year. I'd say I have quite a good breadth of knowledge, I want to say, but without sounding too conceited, but just like an idea of, oh, this is how it's done in this game, this is how it's done in this game, what can I take, what can I learn from all those things?
When you say that you like a month into jumping into esports, you were picked up by an agency. That sounds absurd. Like, I don't think I've ever heard a story like that. That sounds like one of those stories of where you hear that supermodels, you know, are like 13 years old and they're walking in a shopping mall and someone just says, you can be a model, come with me. Like, how did that happen?
So basically, I had some friends who were in esports. So it was in around beginning of September 2018 that I first started trying to do anything. And it was in January 2019 that I got offered my first piece of paid work. And so some of the friends that I had made in that time were already in esports and whatever. And basically one of them couldn't do a job or something. And she recommended me to her agent saying, you should ask her to do it. And so I got contacted, and it was a very last minute thing that ended up not working out. It didn't happen in the end. And I was very, very stressed because it was, you know, to go to like the other side of the world. And it was a game I'd never really had any experience in is an understatement. I didn't even really know this game existed. But I said yes, because I was like, if I say no, that's going to set more of a precedent, and that's gonna piss too many people off and isn't going to help me. And yeah, the fact that I said yes pleased them, even though it didn't work out. And yeah, I don't know, I guess they liked me. I got on with the agent, and that was kind of how that went.
Now, when you say that you were quite stubborn, you were trying to Overwatch, obviously you were in like the contenders scene, which if people don't know is the tier 2 scene below the Overwatch League. But that is actually part of the reason I'm surprised that you would stick with that game, is because no matter how much you love it, that is a game where, as the contenders players themselves will tell you, if you're kind of stuck at that level, it's really hard to get to the Overwatch League level, and for talent even more so, because if people don't know, especially for the first couple of seasons, Overwatch League, as far as I'm concerned, have the greatest collection of like multi-game talent I've ever seen in any game. These were like legends in the other games that they'd been in before. So it's not even that you have to just become the best Overwatch person. You have to basically battle the size of their profile. So was this not daunting? You really thought you were going to make it?
It wasn't daunting because, as we just touched on, I'm a very stubborn person, and I very kind of stick to the mantra that, like, if I don't believe I can fucking do it, then no one's gonna fucking think I can. And like, you know, I came in and at the beginning, I was trash. You know, everyone's trash at the start, but I was very determined and very hardworking, and I knew that I was focusing on the things I had to in order to get better. The thing is the reason I even decided to attempt working in esports in the first place really came from a point of kind of like, I had a load of things lined up, like a very corporate internship. I was just finishing up a really academic degree, and I kind of turned around and was like, actually, screw it, I'm gonna go and do this that I think will please me. And I've kind of continued that attitude in esports. So even though I knew there were a number of things that were not necessarily going to be in my favor in Overwatch, I was like, if I don't stick to what it is I want to get out of this, then like, who am I doing this for? And what am I doing this for? Because I came into this industry to specifically try and do what I want to do. If I'm changing because of what all these other people are saying about, oh, this person's better than you, or this person's like been in it longer, like, what am I going to do? I'm the only person who's going to lose out from that, and everyone else is going to continue working for themselves. Like, I want to specifically prioritize what it is I'm looking to achieve. So that's the reason I kind of stuck around in it long enough, even though I knew, you know, there were people in other games who discouraged me. There were people in Overwatch who discouraged me. Everyone always tries to discourage you from doing what you want to do. And I was like, well, I'm a smart person. I can assess the situation I'm in. And regardless, I still want to give it a go. And that's kind of how it was.
I don't want to force a movie storyline here, but I heard basically, and it's up to you how much you want to say about your private life, but I heard basically that part of what you're saying here, you left out like a personal element, which is, didn't you basically have like, this sounds like the beginning of a Hollywood movie. Someone, is on the corporate trail, and, in the movie, the boss is like, if you stick with it, Benson, you could get that upgrade at the end of the quarter, but you've got to really bring numbers. He's like, oh, bloody hell, and he's not going to his kids' softball games, all that shit. He's just working as well. And then what happens in the movie is they have like a scare where they almost die. They have some horrific thing happen, and they see the light. They go, what was I doing living for this? I was in the rat race, and they come out. Isn't this kind of what happened to you? Didn't you basically have like a health scare?
Yeah.
Is that actually what prompted this pivot into esports?
Yeah. So basically, like I'd been one of those kids who lived their whole life without even so much as breaking a bone, and I got to university, and suddenly like hospital was my second home. Like when I was 20, I got diagnosed with epilepsy, which isn't that scary. It was a hassle, and I had to go through a lot of tests and start taking medication. I went through 2 medications which I had severe reactions to before getting on one that worked. And as a result, they have to continually test you for things every now and then, because if you get epilepsy randomly as an adult, while it's not that uncommon, they still want to be sure that it's not because you've secretly got a brain tumor or something. And I had a blood test at the end of 2017, and I had plenty of blood tests. I didn't think anything of it. And at the beginning of 2018, in February, I got called into hospital, and they said, we've found something in your blood that is quite serious. And we think, they didn't say this in these words, they only actually admitted this when I came back to them and said, look, I've done my research and I know this is what you're looking for. But basically,
right. Did the guy just take a big gulp like shit?
Right. Because they tried to be very euphemistic about it, because they don't want to scare you. But what they thought they'd found was a very, very rare severe type of encephalitis, where it's an autoimmune encephalitis called NMDR receptor encephalitis, and so
it's one where most people die or it can't be treated, right?
Yeah, in essence, what happens is your immune system is attacking your brain. And, I looked it up, and it's basically like, okay, after being diagnosed, you've got like a month to live. And in that month, it's like you go psychotic, then you go catatonic, then you're in a coma, and then you die. And not only that, is I had to be tested for tumors as well, because in women, this particular type of encephalitis is also related to having like ovarian tumors. So suddenly I was in my 3rd year of uni. I was meant to be doing a master's afterwards, so this wasn't even supposed to be my last year of uni. But I was in my 3rd year of uni. I suddenly was being told that I might have cancer, I might have encephalitis. I had to have ultrasounds and a lumbar puncture, and that like it was like horrific. And it wasn't for another like 5 months before I found out that I was not going to die. But studying for my final year exams while going through all that was really horrible. And then after that, I thought I was fine, and it got to a couple of months later, and suddenly, I'm someone who's never suffered from like anxiety or depression or anything like that. And I remember walking home from a bar at night in London and having a panic attack in the middle of the road. And I remember being like, what is wrong? I don't feel sad. I don't, this isn't something that happens to me. And I remember being really confused, and it kept happening. And a friend of mine who's a qualified doctor said, look, I think you might be suffering from post-traumatic stress. And I went to a doctor, and it turned out that's what was happening. So basically 2018, was really, really like horrific health scares for me. And it got to the point where, I was really burnt out from uni, as well as being in a complete mess of a mental state because of what was going on medically. I was meant to be going and doing this really serious internship in business and finance for a global financial company. And I just got to a point where I was like, I don't want to do this. Like, this is not what I want to be doing. Like, I'm going to tell them that I want out of my contract. I'm going to leave uni. I'm not going to do my master's degree. And like, I'm just going to go and do the thing that I'm super passionate about. Like, even if it's something that's super low chance of it working out, I owe it to myself to do it. So, yeah.
Now, I once thought I was going to die, but I was coming down from a psychedelic mushroom trip. So it's not really the same. But my point is, right, in the moment, I really thought like, when I even knew I wasn't going to die, I thought, like, I'm going to remember this forever. Like, I'll hold on to this. And obviously, you can imagine even a day later, like, it was gone. I was back to normal. I was just in the world again, eating a Mars bar or whatever, Like, are you able to sort of hold on to that feeling of when you really did think, like, this could be it? Like, I've maybe only got a few months left. I even have to study for my bloody exams. Like, that's what I'm doing with the end of my life. Can you actually hold on to that when you come into your career?
It's a weird one because it's like, I don't think I'll ever, unless it happens again, I don't think I'll ever fully be able to recreate that feeling of dread. Like, I remember walking out the hospital on the day, calling my dad and like crying on the side of fucking Westminster Bridge in the middle of London. Like, anyone who knows London knows how busy and touristy it is around there, and I was making an absolute prat of myself. But I do very specifically remember certain feelings. Like, I remember thinking, because at the time I was 21, and I remember thinking, this shouldn't be happening to me now. And that feeling of like, I'm too young for this to be happening, I don't think I'll ever really forget that. But I don't know, I'm not really someone who kind of like holds on to stuff like that. I'm very open. That's why I'm happy to talk about it, whatever. It doesn't bother me to speak about it in the same way that I happily talk to people about the fact that I got diagnosed with epilepsy as an adult. It's just sort of one of those things, and I don't kind of cling to it as this terrible dreaded thing happened to me, feel sorry for me, blah, blah. I think it's interesting. And I used to want to go into medicine and be a doctor, so I'm super legitimately interested in it. But when I'm kind of going about work I do, I never sort of think back on it and be like, there's never like a really profound kind of like, I thought I was going to die once and here I am. I need to be grateful for this moment. Like, none of that crap. But also, like, I don't walk around being like, oh, my life was so hard and people should feel sorry for me. Do you know what I mean? Sure. It's interesting. I'm happy to talk about it. And I find it was a pivotal moment in my life. I would prefer a pivotal moment to be less, dreadful and less scary. It is what it is. It happened. It's probably prepared me for the future if any kind of medical scares happen again or whatever. Like, I learned from it, but it's not something that I kind of carry with me on the day to day, being like, this affects how I approach my work, if that makes sense.
Now, if anyone out there wanted to make a game, Geo Bingo, where they just, things that mentioned a lot on your social media, obviously the university angle would 100% be, it would fill many boxes, including the phrase, I was supposed to do a master's degree. Now, why is university and what you did at university, why is it so important to you? Isn't it, I believe I read somewhere, it's something to do with, like, is your dad a scientist or something like that? Is it something along those lines? My dad's pilot. Oh, apologies for that. What is the story then?
Neither of my parents went to university, actually. I had a very straight and narrow academic life. I was very, very good in primary school. I was always like one of the smart kids who found it very easy to pick things up. I went to grammar school, which for those who don't know is it's a state-run school, but it's selective, so you have to pass exams to get in, and they typically are the best schools in the country. I find it hard to talk about without feeling like I'm trying to brag. I did very well in my exams in school, rather effortlessly. And I'd always wanted to go and study a real subject, in inverted commas, at a very prestigious university. And that's what happened. I was always like very interested in that kind of thing. And so it has always been a really important part of my life. And I would love to go back to university one day, even if just part-time to do something, because I do kind of miss academia a bit. Like, I like learning, I like studying. That's why I enjoy studying games and studying analysis and stuff. But there is a part of me that does have like a little indent in my pride, the fact that I was meant to do a master's degree and I came away with a bachelor's. And a bachelor's degree is nothing, bad. It's nothing to be laughed at. But knowing that for so many years of my life, that's what I was preparing for and that's what I was expecting to happen, there is a part of me that almost feels like I failed because I didn't end up doing that. So I kind of laugh it off, and I think being able to publicly laugh it off is what kind of helps me deal with that a little bit. But yeah, no, like academia, university is always a really, really big, important part of my life. Even if I'd have ended up in esports, I still wouldn't have been happy if I hadn't have got a degree.
When you say you enjoy studying, again, if anyone follows any of your socials, you're always posting pictures where it's like all the notes you've just written out about the game, and like even when you're doing ridiculous shit like just translating Korean just for funsies, apparently. Like, so here's the question: is, am I right in getting the read that when you've come into esports, obviously you're pretty fresh, and some of these games or games you've pivoted into, that on the one hand, that's brilliant that you're doing all these notes. It's something that caught my attention. I messaged you about it and basically said, like, if you have this work ethic, you can come in and say yes, you can come in any of these games. Yeah. But I get kind of the underlying vibe that that's kind of also like your security blanket. Like you feel like you have to do all the study and all the way. Is that accurate?
I wouldn't say I feel like I have to. I would say that in the time that I have lived, I guess, and also given just like my history in academia, I've figured out what my best learning mechanisms are. So for me, being able to have like visual learning, being able to write things down, that's really helpful for me. The other one being kinesthetic. So if I I learn a lot by literally casting over something and I'll notice things. The thing for me is I have a really, really poor attention span. So I'm not one of those people who can like sit and watch a movie, for example. I really poor attention span. So I can't just sit and watch a game and expect myself to pick up everything I want to pick up on. If I'm writing things down, then that's forcing myself to acknowledge everything that's happening, and that's how I best learn from that. So, I like sharing stuff on social media because it's multifaceted, I guess. I like showing work that I've done because I'm proud of it, but also like it's a good thing for people to know that I am doing the work, because if I'm sitting making notes at home and no one knows about it, to the outside world, I just sort of look like I'm doing nothing, right? So I wouldn't describe it as a security blanket. I just describe it as like I've figured out what works best for me and I enjoy it. And that's kind of, how I do that.
Right. When I've been, again, just passively, you've been one of the people in the circle of social media people I follow, and I've seen some of your posts like everyone does where, here's the next event I'm doing. It's the classic graphic with all the people and the roles they're doing. This is one thing that surprised me, because when I saw you doing all these notes for games like Rainbow Six, I believe it's Rainbow Six, correct me if I'm wrong, where the last graphic I saw, there was all the people who were doing it, and then you were on there, but it just said reporter. Was this Rainbow Six something else?
Yeah, that was the Prem finals. That was so the last season of ESL Prem is the first one that I casted. So I appeared on it about a year ago just to fill in for someone, but this is the first one that I casted, and I don't know, I guess the others just got off the casting roles. I mean, anyone who knows me knows that I'm not a host. I'm not a reporter. I'm not a host. I'll do it if I really have to, and that's about that. That's kind of what that is. But yeah,
I mean, to be fair, that is something that does happen in other games. Like, for example, there are people who'd rather be the desk host or the analyst, but they get, you want to do the event still, so you get your foot in it. Obviously, like you're saying, you can make money from doing it. But that was the thing that surprised me, because, listen, no offense to the people who do the reporter role, it's a very different skill set to being an analyst. And even though some of those people take a lot of notes, it's the sort of notes that a reporter would do, trivia on the person's career and stuff. They're not analysing the game. That is its own skill set entirely. So ideally, is it color commentator? Is it play-by-play commentator? Is it analyst? What would you choose if you could pick one role and get, the best gig ever at that one? What would be the choice?
I am a color commentator, like hands down. That's where like my absolute heart is, and that's what I love doing. And yeah, and I think I don't know how I'd be as a play-by-play commentator. I've never really given it much stock, but no, yeah, color commentary is really like my heart and soul.
Right, since you said obviously Overwatch was your game for a while, like you'd really put a lot of time into that. Why is Rainbow Six so appealing to you? Because here's the thing, I get Rainbow Six on some level, because I mean, listen, I kind of do the same thing I do with the people in Call of Duty. I'm like, oh, you just like worst Counter-Strike. Well, that's cool for you, People like stuff, some people like Coke, some people like Pepsi. So to me, like, I can sort of see the glimpses of what people like about Rainbow Six, but what is it that draws you in? What's deep about the game?
So it's really interesting, because originally the thing that kind of drew me in is I really like, and I think this is, I'm not super well versed in CSGO, so if I say anything wrong, like, feel free to tell me I'm an idiot. I really like games that have characters that have set loadouts, and that sounds really random, but I like that role-based kind of thing.
Right,
I liked that about Overwatch. I don't like battle royales, but that's the one thing I really liked about Apex Legends is the same thing. Like I like that kind of role-based thing, and Rainbow Six has that. So it's like it's obviously very what's the right word for it? One thing that allows a lot of depth in Rainbow Six is the fact that A, it relies so much on intel. B, almost the entire map is destructible, and so there's not all that much of a limit as to what you can do with the map to be able to facilitate whatever strategy it is you're going for, whether you're on attack or defense. But also the choice of operators that you decide to go with is a strategic decision in and of itself, because each operator does a different thing, it has a different role, and it applies something different to the game. So those kind of combinations of things are why I like the game so much. I'm sure a pro would be able to lament for ages about what, the very specifics that they think make it so deep and better than games like Counter-Strike or whatever. But those are the specific things that drew me to it, is I like it's a team of 5 who you have to decide how you're going to combine these different abilities that you have available to you on the table to use for a very specific strategy that you want to do, where you have to get the one up in intel. Are you going to choose to go for more intel against the other team? You're going to choose to deny their intel. Are you going to choose to go more aggressive? You're going to choose to go more passive. Like, how are you going to do that? I really like all those different kind of permutations that you can go with in the game. And so, yeah, that's really kind of what brought me to the game, I'd say.
I mean, based on that, from games, I am somewhat affiliated with League of Legends, which obviously is another game with totally different characters, and you build a different team comp, and that every matchup in it involves, there's all these variables. But I have to say, being as that is one of my secondary or my ancillary games, I actually don't put a lot of my time into trying to learn all those specifics. I just stay big picture and I do my thing, and I kind of facilitate other people doing that role, because I know that I can't put in the hours that I put into CSGO. So when you're working in a game like Rainbow Six in that sense, is it do you actually enjoy the challenge of whenever you have a game with that much burden of knowledge, essentially, and so many variables? I mean, nobody can know everything about the game, and obviously the meta is obviously changing that. It's like you're always rushing to try and get to the next thing that people are doing and figure out what's happening next. Do you enjoy the challenge of that?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it's been an interesting thing because obviously, as I say, I started off in Overwatch, and I already had a lot of hours in the game of Overwatch before I ever started casting it. So the foundation that I came into Overwatch with was a lot higher than the foundation that I came into Siege with. And so it's been very interesting getting over that initial hump of like, okay, I need to nail the basics before I can even delve into the real like nitty gritty. But I really enjoy kind of watching something and knowing that there is an extra level of depth that I could be talking about that I'm currently not, and I need to go back and study, and I need to improve on that. And I find that very appealing. And yeah, I mean, you mentioned you can't talk about everything at once, and that's part of the beauty of the skill of the color commentator, right? Is deciding the most important thing that you should be talking about and being able to tie that into the overall story and the macro of what's going on in the game. But trying to learn all the stuff so that I have this massive reservoir from which I can pluck whatever it is I want to do and sew together all these ideas, like that's super appealing to me. And like I won't be satisfied until I'm at the point where I know everything. And as you say, no one's ever going to know everything, so I'm never going to be fully satisfied. And I think that's part of the excitement of learning to analyze a game.
Where does PUBG fit into all this mess? Because to me, PUBG is a very weird game because it still exists. It's still an esport. It still has money pumped into it, but no one really knows like what its lifespan is. Obviously, in some senses, it actually got overtaken in the casual respect by its own rivals in the genre. Like, how have you tangentially been involved with PUBG? And is that something that will continue?
All right, I'm going to tell you a secret. I've never played PUBG. I've never played PUBG.
Have you played other battle royales though?
Well, I've played Apex Legends because for a little while right at the beginning, I worked on a show that EA were doing, so I kind of got paid to play Apex Legends. But I've never been a huge battle royale person. They don't really appeal to me that much. PUBG, I got hired to do, once again, it was a stage hosting gig, and I'd never stage hosted before, but it was in Berlin, and I really wanted to go to Germany. For the PUBG Mobile Global Final prelims, and I don't play mobile games. You could look on my phone right now. There's not a single mobile game on there. And like, yeah, I had a good time. It was fun, and so I sort of knew that in order to do that, I did have to kind of put some work in so that I at least understood the basic mechanics of the game and whatever. And so that kind of put me in a position where it's like, okay, I could cast PUBG. And so then there came this opportunity to cast some PEL contenders because James Banks was not available for a while.
Yes.
And I did put in a decent amount of work in the week leading up to that because I had to learn all the weapon silhouettes and stuff like that. Stuff that people who play the game automatically know and whatever. But I actually found the game fairly easy to... I could use concepts that I knew from other games that I'd casted, especially Overwatch, which I knew the most, to apply to this game. Even though I wasn't really familiar with Battle Royales, I wasn't really familiar with the flow of the game and things like that, I could still recognize, you know, parallels and see concepts that that I had done before. So I kind of managed to sort of bullshit my way through a color cast of that. A few color casts of that. But I wouldn't say I've ever been like really involved in PUBG per se. It's more that there have been certain casts that have come up. I'm happy to cast it. It's like I have fun casting whatever it is I'm casting. And I have a decent enough knowledge base now that I can do it. But I wouldn't say I've ever been involved in it. I've never been involved with the community really or followed the game or anything like that. It's more been like, all right, I'll learn what I have to when the circumstance arises, and that's kind of how that's been.
So with Call of Duty, again, obviously a game that contrasts. I mean, it's not, even though it's an FPS game, it's very different to Rainbow Six. I think Rainbow Six is more on the side of the Counter-Strikes of the world in that regard. It's so much about tactics, etc. The question that I would have for that is, when you alluded to the fact that it's very hard to break into that game as well, because that's another game where, I mean, half of the like legends of the casting of that game still cast the game to this day. Like a lot of them are very much still involved.
Yeah.
And what other thing as well that I want to ask about that is it a case that, do you think your style and your strengths as a caster or an analyst, do they work in Call of Duty? Because again, listen, I'm just doing it as a joke. I'm being a chauvinist for Counter-Strike, etc. But I will say, if you just look at the way people seem to like to consume a Call of Duty, it is very much on the casual side. And people want the hype. That's basically the main thing they want. They want the pop-off and all that. And it's more about, like, it feels to me more about the personalities. So do you actually... something to draw you in about that? Do you actually like the game in that sense? So
there's a really interesting point actually, because I remember when I love Call of Duty as an esport and I love watching it, and one thing that drew me to it so much was the community, because one thing I didn't like about Overwatch was I didn't feel like me as a person really fit into such a censored kind of broadcast or whatever, and that's not me necessarily passing an opinion on how that's done. It's more just like I like being able to be a little bit more tongue-in-cheek and whatever, and go along with that kind of humor, and I've really enjoyed getting that out of Call of Duty. But your point is super valid, because one of the things that was my concern was that in Call of Duty, it's more like both casters have to be able to do like 75% play-by-play, 25% color, and that's not what my specialism was, and that's not where I came from. And so I remember, the first couple of times I tried to cast Call of Duty, it was a real like interesting learning curve for me to try and be able to play by play and keep up with the hype. And I think having that experience is useful, because in Siege, both casters really have to do 75% color, 25% play-by-play, you could argue. So you still have to be able to do that in Siege, and I think being able to have dipped my toes in it in Call of Duty has been helpful. But yeah, you are right. Overall, the general casting style in Call of Duty is not necessarily how mine is, and that was something that I did wonder about for a bit. And of course, like, Call of Duty has its own strategy, but the depth of the strategy also kind of had a bit of a limit as well. There's a lot of strategy to do with how spawns are done and very specific positioning around the map so that you can get yourself the advantageous spawns in a game. But it's very fast-paced, which I love. I love fast-paced games, but the depth of the strategy doesn't change at any point in the game, and there isn't sort of those extra dimensions that even in Overwatch you see, but you see in things like Counter-Strike and Rainbow Six. So while I love the community, I love the game, and I will continue being a fan of the esport, there did kind of come a point where I thought, is this like the right place for me to shine my skills and things like that? Am I going to do super well in this game? I could put in all the time and I could do all the work and improve, absolutely, but am I going to feel fulfilled thinking that I'm where I'm meant to be?
As you alluded to earlier, and again, anyone who follows your social media, this is always a common theme, is you actually, for fun, like I say, it's not a joke, for fun, learn Korean and even other languages, etc. Now, the thing about that is, if you're doing that for fun and you already are getting to like a half-decent level, which it is an incredibly hard language for English learners to learn, I would just say this is, if there was ever a chance to come back in Overwatch and to be at the Overwatch League level, would you want to do it? Because I feel like that would be the most OP skill you could have, is if you could actually yourself read all the Korean forums and all their interviews without having to get anything translated or have to get it through the Vine, which means someone else has to be interested enough to do it. That would be an incredible, like, extra, arrow to have in the whatever arrows are kept in. I forget what that term is. But yeah, you know what I mean? It would be an amazing thing for a Western to have, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't want to overstate my ability. I've been on a little bit of a hiatus with language stuff because I've been focusing on other things during lockdown. But, I'd only been doing Korean for like 2 or 3 months. Something like that, when I was posting a lot.
But you do it like every day, though.
Yeah, I was doing at least 2 hours up to 10 hours a day. Because I really find languages super, super interesting. I agree. I think it would be very, very useful in Overwatch. And that's what we see with Wolf, who's one of the casters in the Overwatch League. He obviously speaks Korean fluently, has a real strong link to the Korean community and things like that. And you can see how well that works for him. Would I choose to go back to Overwatch though if they turned around and said, hey, you can speak Korean and you can cast, you want to come back? I don't know. I think I'm over it. Like, I think I've moved past it. I totally agree with the sentiment that you're saying, and I think that, at the time it would have been great, and if I could have used that to have sold myself more, then I absolutely would have done. But I've tried to apply it in Siege, because there is a growing Korean scene in Siege which doesn't get much Western attention, and I sort of like the idea of being able to act as almost like a bridge. And I've interviewed for written pieces, not for broadcast, interviewed some of the Korean players in Korean to try and write things about the Korean scene. Okay. And I really enjoy doing that. But I don't know if I would want to use it to go back to Overwatch, because I think I've sort of grown from that, and I've set my sights on different goals, and I'm not really in a place where I would want to sort of throw those away just because a goal that I wanted before has suddenly become, vacant and available.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, I've outright even just told you privately, like, should come to CS. Like, would you be interested in doing CS:GO? Because, well, first of all, I like to work with all the good people in esports, and I actually think CS is one of the games that's the most open and receptive to basically just people who have talent. Now, I will say, asterisk, if you're a woman, there's certain people who'll always just say, well, do they really know the game? That just comes with the territory. But I would just say, as you've seen with Monty's coming now to Flashpoint, I didn't really see much pushback there. People were loving it. People were enjoying it. We've definitely had people from other games. We've even had people return from games like Overwatch, and they weren't treated like traitors. It was like, oh, cool, someone's back. Great, awesome. Bring him back into the fold, So is it a game you would you ever try to pivot into it? I mean, I know at the time my advice was garbage, because I said, like, try and do like one of those small lands. About a month later, all lands cancelled. Yeah, so sadly that wasn't the best advice now, but is it something you would like to do?
So CS has always kind of intrigued me, and there was a period of time where I was in my head when I was like, all right, I'm ready to leave Overwatch, when I was starting to kind of scope out other esports, and I consider CS very much, and I spoke to a number of people about it, all of whom said, don't do it. And the thing with CS is my reluctance to go towards it is nothing to do with my feelings about the game. I think that there's a reason that it is the kind of longest running esport and one of, if not the most successful esport of all time. It's just that I've never played CSGO, and I haven't watched much CSGO, and I think it has such a legacy and such a story that I'm not in a position right now where I want to drop everything I'm working on to specifically catch up with all of that and get to a point where I feel comfortable that I'm not some outsider who's trying to profit off of a potential thing, like I would want to be like, all right, I know about this stuff and I'm really ingrained in this. And right now I'm just not, and I'm not in a position where I can dedicate the time to do that. But that doesn't mean I'm not interested in CSGO. It looks like a absolutely sick game. It looks amazing. It looks like I love listening to the cast. You know, I think the only CSGO event, in inverted commas, that I've been to was the Omen Challenge, that secret one that was in Camden.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And like that was awesome, and I think it looks like a fantastic game. I'm just very much an outsider as it stands, and so it's nothing to do with the fact that I don't have an interest in the game. It's to do with the fact that, can I realistically give everything to get to where I would need to be in CSGO right now? I don't know if that's the case. And also having spoken to loads of people and people being like, oh yeah, if you wanted to be a color caster in CSGO, like you can't do that because like, you know nothing about the game. Like, yeah, I know nothing about the game right now. I know how to study though. I know how to learn. But I don't know, just kind of a lot of people set the precedent for me that I would be unwelcome.
I'd just say, listen, I'm obviously biased, but I'd say they're the esports equivalent of the people telling you before, don't become someone in esports. There's always people who they love to tell you that you can't do what they can't do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I completely agree. I mean, I remember very much before I started casting, but had started expressing an interest in wanting to do it, someone turning around to me saying, and someone who is still a friend of mine today, someone turning around to me and saying, don't color cast, women shouldn't color cast. Just straight up. And this person was a color caster, and he, you know, I don't know, like,
don't narrow it down too much, but we get the premise.
I'm not going to, but I remember being like, okay. Obviously, it didn't take his advice,
sure.
But that's definitely sticks to mind, and sort of comments like that I've had do, like, they're still there, they're still in my head, and I'm thinking like, all right, I see why you said that, I get it.
Thing is, though, like I say, it's actually the people's own mental limitation that has stopped so many really good people from moving to other games. Especially, so many are scared to skip genres, even games within genres. Like, they all think, like, maybe I could do a sequel, or like if I do PUBG, maybe I could do Fortnite. Like, it has to be really close for them. So it feels like for some reason you don't get. Even though on the one hand for CS you're saying like you'd want to honour the legacy of the game, and you'd have to go all in, eat, sleep, breathe, etc. At the same time, though, the challenge would be pretty exciting, right?
Oh, no, I completely agree with that. Like, it's that is definitely something that I agree with you on. It just so happens that right now that challenge is something that I've committed to with Rainbow Six. So, like, that's kind of more my point, is it's like the whole idea really appeals to me. It's just like right now, I don't know if that's something that I would be able to do. But yeah, no, absolutely. The challenge of being like, right, okay, I'm going to come in from nothing, and I'm going to prove to people that I am good at my job and that I can put in all the hours and put in all the work and get to know everything that's going on and some of the story and the history of this scene. That, to me, we've spoken about how much I like studying, how much I like learning, how much I like really involving myself in things. That's incredibly appealing. Absolutely.
Since Rainbow Six is the main focus now, is this a game where, like, how do you set goals in that game? Is the game to do all of those, like, 6 invitationals, like that's the equivalent to the major if someone's a CSGO fan? Is it to just be the biggest caster? Is it just improve? Where do you put the metrics for how you know you succeed and you're heading in the right path?
So my kind of overall vague goal that I've tried not to make super specific has always been to be mainstay tier 1 talent in a game as a caster. Well, a color caster. So I try not to carve too much of a path for how I specifically want it to go, because I've done that in the past and I've let myself down, and in ways that have turned out to lead to better things, obviously, as how things always happen, but it's still kind of, it sets you up for failure before you even start. So it's like, I would love to cast SI, but I'm not going to turn around and say, you know, the only way I know I'm successful is if I've casted SI by 2022. Do you know what I mean? Like, I would love to believe that would be able to happen. And yeah, absolutely, I'm gonna work in a way towards that trajectory, and I'm going to believe in myself that I have the skill, the capability, if nothing but the dedication to get to that point. But I'm not going to set it in stone and say that is my metric for success. So, as I say, tier 1 talent in the game that I'm in this case, Rainbow Six, that's where I want to be, and that is what I'm aiming for. But I don't know what that path looks like, especially given that, you know, Rainbow Six has just changed from ESL to Face It, and a lot of parts of the format are changing. It would be kind of stupid and misguided to be like, all right, I'm gonna go from this bit to this bit to this bit and things like that. But yeah, I would love to cast whatever the equivalent of Pro League is now. That would be amazing. I'd love to cast SI. I'd love to cast, I mean, for this year, I really set my goal as I want to at least cast a dream hack for Rainbow Six, but obviously 2020 kind of took a downturn. And so, yeah, like events would be super, super cool. But like, I also know what I'm going up against. So I know that I have to work on a lot of my, you know, how I stand against the people who are essentially my rivals. But that's kind of how I see it, is like, yeah, there's all these things that I would love to do, but I'm not going to set anything in stone because like, I don't know what the trajectory looks like. I just know that I'm not going to allow it to tank.
When I reference the people who they have the talent, maybe they even have all the skill set to do it, it's just that they mentally themselves decide I can't do it, it's too daunting, like I just don't want to put myself out there. The problem is the other type of people that you get who have problems in the industry tend to be the ones who, it's exactly as you're saying here, they have like a literal metric, and they come in the game and they've already decided, right, if a year from now I'm not hired to basically the biggest event, then something's gone wrong. Either people haven't recognized my talent, or I'm being fucked over, or I'm better than that guy and he's only there because he's got a big name. Like basically entitlement. It doesn't seem like that's actually something that really is entered the equation for you.
Yeah, no, I don't feel, I think if you go into something feeling entitled, not only are you a twat, but like people are gonna notice that. And it's much better to show that you're working hard and that you're remaining humble from the fact that you don't feel entitled to work. Obviously, remaining humble by being self-deprecating is something different, and I wouldn't recommend that. I think you should definitely always kind of sell yourself and sure. If you don't look like you're believing yourself, no one else is going to believe in you. But yeah, being entitled about things. I mean, I made a really huge mistake when I started in esports, where I was like, I really equated the speed at which I attained success was directly linked to whether or not I was good enough. And it destroyed my mental health for some time, because I just made myself miserable, because I was like, oh, this happened for this person, why isn't it happening for me? And it wasn't a case of I felt entitled to those jobs. It was a case of I thought that I was good at what I was doing, and maybe it actually transpired that I wasn't. And once I unlinked those things and I realized, actually, no, that doesn't mean that I'm not good at things. It just means that like the situation is different and I'm a different person. I have a different skill set. There are different opportunities. Like it doesn't all happen the same for everybody. That was a really big like moment for me. Like, I don't want to say an epiphany, that's a bit too profound, but you know, that was a really big moment. And so it really helped me to kind of slow down and be like, I am just going to do what I'm doing and what I know I'm good at. I'm going to keep doing work. I'm going to ensure that it's clear to the outside world that I'm doing work and where my passions are and what I'm trying to do. I'm going to keep making content. I'm going to keep practicing. I'm going to like blah, 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 whatever. And I know that I'm good. So that's kind of that, right? I'm going to, you know, network, I'm going to sell myself to people and things like that. You know, I had a conversation with a friend the other day who was like, you know, in 2 years' time, if you haven't made it to where you want to be, are you going to quit? And I was like, I don't think there's ever a point at which I'm going to concede that it's over. Do you know what I mean? And like, maybe that's super naive, maybe it's really stupid, but that's the way I kind of see it. Is I can't see there being a point at which I'm like, oh, it didn't work out because I'm crap. So like, it's sort of stupid to set in stone in my head how things should work out and rush myself for when I'm meant to achieve X, Y, and Z at whatever time, if I know I'm not going to give up on it anyway.
Rainbow Six as a game is one I only know in kind of my role as the esports historian. Like I tried to know roughly like who were the regions that were the best and who were the champions of the big tournaments, but I don't follow the game. I always tell people like, this is not one of my games. Yeah. So one of the things that actually has been a little bit disappointing to me as like an esports OG is if it ever really did get massive and it just like was ubiquitous, you couldn't get away from it. Like League of Legends is a good example of that. It would at least then make me think, well, I could dip my foot into it. I could see what it's all about, you know, see something. But unfortunately, Rainbow Six, it seems like it's a bit of a self-contained community at the moment. Like it doesn't have that much overlap with the other games. Like I don't even know that many CS people who follow it, even though actually it should have a lot of overlap. You'd think there'd be a lot of similarities there. So what does it need as an esport to go to that next level where it could be mentioned in the same breath as the League of Legends, the CSGOs, the biggest games in the world?
I actually completely agree with you. I've found that since coming into Rainbow Six, a lot of the people I speak to don't follow other esports or whatever. It is very self-contained, and I think there is a danger there of breeding some kind of gatekeeping or whatever. And there is like, as in any community, you do find that where a certain portion of the community doesn't they want to be like, this is the best game in the world and nothing comes close. And I don't think that's a very good way to look at any game, regardless of what game you're working in. I think there just needs to be a bit more work put into how accessibility in broadcasts can be done. I personally feel, I don't know what your opinion on something like this is. I personally feel that using all of the competitive pro-level callouts in a cast is not conducive to accessibility. I think that there are some which are obvious enough that you can use, and I think using the compass callouts that are actually on the screen in game are fine because anyone who plays the game will know that. But there are so many callouts in the game that a person who has never watched the broadcast before, never watched this game before, coming and watching a broadcast, and every single thing that's being said on the broadcast is something that not only do they have to learn and they don't know what it means, but there isn't anywhere online where you can just look it up and read what it all is. That can be off-putting to a lot of people. And I think that the general accessibility in the broadcast does need to be improved, whether or not that's through shoulder content where things like this are discussed, especially at something like SI, for example, where you're going to have the largest viewership. I don't know exactly how it should be done, but I think that Rainbow Six is definitely, of all the games that I've had really anything to do with from an esports perspective, it's the one that it has the steepest learning curve, not just for the game, but also as a viewer who isn't already very, very familiar with playing the game. And so I think that's kind of what it is, because it's a fantastic game and it's great. They also need to fix some of like the observing tools, because it has the same sort of problem that some other games have, where like you can't get a full picture of what's happening without seeing everything from a top-down perspective, because whatever, and because of how tactical it is, it really helps to know what's going on. But yeah, for the most part, there just needs to be a few accessibility things done, because it is like it's a great game to watch, but like in the same way that I think Overwatch is great to watch, but that's coming from someone who has hundreds and hundreds of hours in the game. Do you know what I mean? So yeah.
Actually, that's one thing. I'll put you on the spot here, but within the nature of the question, it should be a thing that puts you on the spot. Right? If someone, like, say I wanted to watch it, or someone who's a fan, like they might be a fan of CS if they follow my channel, or a general game, and it could be anything of the big esports titles. Say they hear this and they go, I'd at least want to check it out. What would be like a great match that would be a perfect way to sort of give them a primer, get them into it? Something about this would be compelling.
All right, well, this is going to sound like a really obvious example, but the SI 2020 finals is a very good match, not just because, it's the finals of the biggest event of the year. It was probably the highest level of Siege that you're going to get to see, but also the story that went throughout the whole game was incredibly palpable. It was NIP versus SSG, so that's LATAM versus North America. Straight away, that's huge. It's on North American soil. And as far as I'm aware, it's the first time a North American team ended up winning. But for much of the game, it looked like Ninjas in Pajamas were going to get it. And that would just have been huge. And the way that the story shifted in that series was incredibly entertaining. And just it was one of the best storylines that you will have in a game of Siege, and arguably any other game. And the level of play was just fantastic. And it was just amazing to watch. I've gone back and watched that series a number of times. It wasn't my favorite series from SI, but it is just a fantastic series to watch.
Right, at the end of this interview, do you have any final words anyone you'd like to thank?
No. I don't know. Like I guess like all the friends I have in esports who are further on than me, who haven't dismissed me. Because there have been people who are further on than me that have dismissed me, and it's incredibly condescending and not very helpful. So, to all those people.
This video was kindly supported by Alexander Rao, Dean Tanglis, Emanuel Särnbratt, JDubs, NateDOhDoubleG, the Puyallup Tribe, Tobias Bernasconi, Xinged, and a special thanks always goes out to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my shows? Maybe ask a question in my monthly video AMA? Do you want teasers? Who are the guests on my next content? Maybe you want to take part in one of those donated discussions with me where we go really deep into the weeds. Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today in the description box link below.